This program is made possible by a grant from Wachovia Bank and Trust Company.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last March 29, over 48 radio stations on his network, Woody Durham had one of the most exciting experiences of his lifetime as a broadcaster.
He'll have another shot coming. 63-62. Worthy trying to hit this one. Up with the free throw, and it's no good. Rebounded Georgetown, away to Floyd. Floyd fires. It's short. How about them Heels? They are the national champions. In a classic game. In an absolute classic game. North Carolina has beaten Georgetown 63-62 for the national championship.
It was indeed an exciting moment, Woody, and Woody and I are sitting in Carmichael Gym after a busy day this past weekend, but how are you?
Just fine, thank you, sir, and it's nice to be with you, Bill, on your program.
Well, we're just delighted to have you. You've been a Tar Heel in all dimensions, student, fan, sportscaster, but let's get right into your career. How did you get into broadcasting?
Well, it was probably not more unusual than a lot of people have gotten started in this business. I was born in Mebane, lived there, and then my father was in the textile business, and that took us over to Mount Holly and finally to Albemarle, where I went to junior high and high school, and I'd gotten involved with some oratorical work and with one of the civic clubs that my father happened to be in, and so had really had no formal training other than some speech people working with me, but the manager of the radio station happened to be the judge one night at one of our local contests, and so that summer he heard me doing PA at a youth baseball tournament, and so the summer before my junior year, about a month before I went into high school, junior year of high school, he called me up and told me they had an opening at the radio station and would I like to come by and audition, and so I started working in August before my junior year in high school and have been in it ever since.
Well, if I ever saw anybody in whom the will to be was born, it's certainly you. But
well, everybody a long time has said I've got that gift for gab, my relatives and so forth, when I've gotten out, and now my 9-year-old son does it a lot, but I used to play a lot in the yard as a youngster, and I'd create my own games as a lot of young people, you know, do today, and so I guess I did start it even long before I ever got into it officially.
Well, being the voice of the Tar Heels, particularly in basketball and football, that's quite an experience, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'll tell you, Bill, it wound up being one of the things that I really wanted to do in my career. I have my oldest son is 17, and shortly before he was born, my wife and I were discussing sort of our lives and everything, and deciding where I wanted to go with my career, because, you know, at that time, if you really went to work for the network, you had to work for an O&O, as they called it, an owned and operated network station in New York or Washington or Chicago. You could not then commute out of the area and work and come back and so forth. And I just decided that I really wanted to stay in North Carolina. And once that decision was made, I was working then in Greensboro as the sports director at WFMY-TV, and I decided then that I wanted to do two things. My first objective was to do the C.D. Chesley ACC network. I'd gotten a chance to be involved and get to know Ches when we were working as undergraduates at the university, and so I was fortunate enough to do that for a 4-year period, and then Bill Curry left the Tar Heel network to go to Pittsburgh, and I decided then that that was really, I guess, my ultimate goal. If I was going to stay in North Carolina, that was the one thing I wanted to do, was to do the North Carolina games on radio.
Well, you're certainly superb at it. I've done like a lot of other people and turned the audio off on the picture and listened to you. But,
I tell a lot of people when we do that, I hope they're watching the same game they're listening to.
Watching the one you're telling, huh? Where were you involved with Jim Thacker and Bones McKinney?
That was during the 4 years that we worked for Ches on the ACC network, and Bones, of course, at that time had left Wake Forest and was working the State Department of Correction, was working as an analyst, and so he and Jim and I were doing the games, and Bones and I would travel together a lot. He'd come through Greensboro. South Carolina was still in the league at the time, and we'd make a lot of automobile trips down to Columbia and Clemson and so forth. So I got to hear all of Bones' old stories. I had to get him to do something, Bill, to take my mind off his driving. But anyway, so we were involved there, and actually I enjoyed doing that and wanted to continue doing the television. And Ches had Jim and myself at that time splitting the games. I would do a game, Jim would do a game, I'd do a half, Jim would do a half. And I don't think that situation was really liked by either one of us, because we were primarily play-by-play people. And so that's one of the reasons why when the radio situation came open, I pursued it. And although I have regretted being involved in some other big games that haven't involved Carolina over the years, I haven't looked back on it with any regret at all, because I said earlier it was something I wanted to do.
Woody, when Carolina gets ready to play a game here in Carmichael, and you and your sidekick Jim Hebner and all your crew up here on the railing, take us back of the game a little bit. What do you do to get ready to bring us all that you give us when the minute the game starts and we work our way through?
Well, I think it's an ongoing process. It's something you have to be totally involved in all of the time. By that I mean, certainly I've had a background for almost 25 years in the sports business, and so I know a lot just from my involvement in that capacity about the game and the people and so forth. But I think you have to constantly keep trying to learn, and by doing that I listen to as many other games as I possibly can, maybe not all the way through, try to watch as many of the games on TV so I'll be familiar with personnel and that sort of thing. But daily, you read a lot of newspapers. I read regularly the Raleigh and the Durham and the Greensboro and the Charlotte papers and everything, more or less for the individual columns, because as you well know, being a friend of as many sports writers as you are, a lot of them have differing opinions about things, and they will write those opinions, and so by reading those, it sort of helps you really form the foundation for your feeling about something, like the experimental rules or that sort of thing. So, but I would say actual paperwork to get ready, making up an unofficial scoring chart that I use with a lot of information about the players, is probably about 3 hours on a basketball game, and I would just average football, which is a little bit different, of course. That takes about 15 hours.
Do you make it a systematic thing where you take a given athlete, well, certainly one that would play a lot on a game any night, you learn a lot about him, you know, where he's from and all of that?
Well, I've always felt like, you know, people know these young men as basketball players, and during the course of a broadcast, I like to tell them a lot of other things about the young men. I want to make them more than just a name and a number and a guy who maybe have scored 35 points. So we talk a lot about their high school background, if they're young players, something maybe about their families and so forth. And so you just try to work that in. And I have a lot of that just notes as reminders to myself written down on this unofficial scoring chart that I keep. And so that way I think it helps me a lot. And of course the main thing you're changing from game to game are those individual percentages and scoring totals and things like that for these young men.
Well, now you do a program every Sunday with Dick Crum when the game is over, and then with Dean Smith after each game on weekends.
Right.
What preparation goes into that? I know that it just doesn't happen, and particularly when you played, say it like you did at Texas Tech, and here it is the next Sunday at noon, there you and Dick were. How in the world do you get all that done?
Well, videotape, which we are working on right now, has really revolutionized this business, of course, and the fact that they've now made it so mobile has really helped us a lot, because for example, the games can be videotaped, and then when we get back, those games are then edited. Very similar process with the basketball as well. Now in Dick's case, when he does his football show, we will come back then and we have the natural sound on there, so we create the atmosphere of the game, but we're able on another channel of that audio to put Dick's narration. So we will sit down and simply look at it on a monitor and then go through and he records that, and then we do the other segments. Now during the week, we have probably gone and videotaped a feature with one of the players, sometimes 2 or 3 of the players. Again, to try to let the audience know something about them as an individual, get a nice, good look at them. That's one thing that always bothers me about football. People are never able to see those young men up close. Maybe that's why people identify sometimes, get more wrapped up in basketball than they do football. But we usually do that anywhere from about 9 in the evening until midnight, and then the program in the pieces that we've done is then taken back and put together as a single unit with the format that we've laid out, and then the dubs are made and they're picked up by people around 5 a.m. and we have one person taking the tapes of the show to Greensboro and Asheville, another one going to Charlotte, and a third one going down the Greenville-Wilmington area. So it's almost a night process from early September until the end of March.
But you lunge into it right after the game's over on Saturday afternoon then?
Well, yeah, they start editing, and we will usually get back and start doing the actual show with Dick about 9 o'clock. Now, we usually go about an hour after the game with Coach Smith when we do his show, because Dean likes to sometimes have the excitement of the play-by-play off the radio, and so if we've got 2 or 3 games, if we happen to play the game like on a Saturday afternoon, we may do the show right after the game and then just use the radio audio of that particular game, and he will have narrated the highlights of the other 2.
Well, now you do your hotline program, you do these coaches television programs, you're live on the air. You've got an enormous fan following. Do they ever catch you and send you notes and say, oops, wait a minute?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they sure do. Sometimes I think the success of the season cuts down on a lot of the mail that we get. But yes, and you know, and I want them to.
Sure.
And I like to always get letters of criticism that are constructive criticism, anything that can help me. And I had a manager once in broadcasting tell me, Bill, he said, well, you know, you shouldn't pay much attention to those. You get one critical letter out of a whole season. I said, well, you know, we base a lot in this business, though, on one person's opinion and a rating. One person can say what program he's watching, and that will determine whether that program is 1 or 2 in a specific area, representing sometimes 1,000 people in the viewing audience. And so if a letter is critical, but it's constructive criticism, then I really do like to get that. And I've had enough of them over the time, not a great deal, but enough of them that I think have really helped. And I like the fans to be that interested. That's what makes what I do a lot of fun, because we do have, as you know, over the years, just rabid fan interest in this area. And our fans are very knowledgeable, too.
But I don't think they're abusive.
No, they're not.
It's really a well-disciplined kind of enthusiasm, but it's real, as you say.
Yes, it is. And I think certain situations that we're in tend to spoil us a little bit with the people that we work with and the fans that we are accustomed. I know right here in Carmichael, you know, the fact that you see no signs, or you see no waving, or anybody, you know, really acting out of the way. And that really sort of spoils you. And then you are, when you go somewhere where that type of demonstration is evident, then you know it really does concern you, because I think we need to. I don't think you need to tone down rivalries, but maybe we need to clean some of the rivalries up and take some of the abusiveness out of it.
I certainly agree with you. Well, you mentioned we're here in Carmichael, and there's the 19-foot marker, and there's the 30-second clock. What about these 2 changes, Woody?
Bill, I really like them. I was of the opinion last year that I thought we had to do something, because the scoring averages for basketball over the nation, the scoring averages were going down, combined scoring averages for 2 teams. And I really thought the game was losing some of its fan appeal. Now, the people who say that, you know, we've got a great game and no need to mess with it and anything like that, I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think you can always improve on something that's good. And I didn't know what length of clock or what the dimensions of the 3-point circle would be, but after I've seen them this year, I like them at 19 feet, and I like the 30-second clock. Now, I think basketball would still be exciting if the clock were 45 seconds and the shot circle were 21 feet or at the top of the free throw circle. But I think they should be a part of the game. If we take that 3-point circle out too far, then we've only let it figure in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the game, and guys are throwing up really low percentage shots from there. And so I like it. I think it's made it exciting this year for the fans. I know the players have liked it. Some people have said, well, you're taking the coaching out of the game. Well, I'm not sure it's not a good thing to take some of the coaching out of the game. That still doesn't take away from the decisions they made. For example, I think Dean Smith this year has done as good a job as any coach in the country taking advantage of the existing rules. And as you know, from having followed his career as closely as I have, he has always shown that tendency. You give him a given rule, and if he knows that's the rule, then he will use it to his best advantage. That's exactly how the Four Corners was born years ago.
He's a very, very good coach.
That's right.
Well, now, here we are, the last week of the season. The Atlantic Coast Conference tournament starts in Atlanta the week after that. Then we work all the way through to April 4 in Albuquerque with the NCAA finals. Where will these rules apply in that process?
These rules will apply through the tournament. When the coaches met last spring and decided to adopt these rules, they agreed then that these rules would go through the tournament, and that rule was then enforced by the athletic directors acting as the basketball committee. And as you know, in the middle of this season, there came this furor to drop the rules during the tournament. Well, I think that was due to the fact that maybe at that particular time, a team like North Carolina might have been taking better advantage of the rules than any of the other teams in the league. Now, North Carolina seems to have cooled with its outside shooting a little bit, at least in that three-game stretch where it was not very successful. The other teams are taking better advantage of it. Clemson recently shooting very well from the outside. So it was decided that, yes, they would do this. They would keep these rules in effect for the tournament. But then the rules will not be in effect once NCAA play starts after the tournament is over. And a lot of people are wondering how it's going to affect our teams. I don't think the three-point field goal is going to affect, because I think the teams that have used that to their advantage will be very proficient at outside shooting. And I think you're going to see so many zones, Bill, in NCAA play, you're going to have to be able to shoot outside over the top of them. Well, now the ACC tournament, by everybody's judgment, has become one of the great social events in our part of the world. Sure.
And judging by the demands for tickets, there's no diminution in it, I can say that. But what do you see coming into Atlanta? It's going to be a hotly contested one like always? I think so. I think everybody is going into Atlanta anticipating another Carolina-Virginia matchup in the finals. I think we would all be disappointed if it doesn't come down to that. You know, Bill, in a lot of ways, the tournament itself, while it is still a big social event, as you point out, and it's going to be rather interesting to go into Atlanta. It will be the first time the tournament has been held there, so it's a little bit of history in a way. In 1975, when the NCAA started taking more than one of our teams from the Atlantic Coast Conference, it began to diminish. And then, of course, 3 years ago, I think we sent 5. 2 years ago, we sent 4. And then last year, we sent 4. And I think there's a real good possibility that we'll send 4 again this year. Carolina and Virginia. I like Maryland's chances, North Carolina State's chances. I don't know about Wake Forest now that they are suffering the injuries at the moment. The Deacons have lost Alvis Rogers. Danny Young has a bum ankle. Anthony Teachy's hurting at the moment. So I don't know. It would depend, I think, a lot on what happens to Wake Forest during the final week of the regular season. But at the outset of the year, I thought it was a one-team race, to be quite honest with you. I thought it was Virginia. I just didn't see how anybody, and Dean Smith expressed surprise that his team was able to beat Virginia twice during the regular season. Then it became Virginia and Carolina. Now I think those 3 teams that we just talked about, State, Maryland, and Wake Forest, have all gotten in there. And so I think it's going to be a very, very competitive tournament. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't want to be the team that has to play Bobby Crimmins' team in the first round in Atlanta. So I think it is competitive, you know, that far down. And but I think we should have 4 of our teams go on to NCAA play. Do you think that the minute that play stops and we get into the Eastern Regionals, that the fact that these changes are not a part of that competition will in some way disadvantage the ACC representatives? I don't think so. We mentioned a moment ago the outside shooting. I think the teams that have used the rules to their benefit are going to be able to shoot the ball outside. Now, of course, there will be no clock, so you're going to find lower scoring games, I think, because, Bill, I think when you get into that activity, that area of play, there are a great many teams, and believe me, I think this is a better balanced league nationwide this year. I think we've got 50 or 60 teams that are capable of winning the national championship through a given stretch. And I think we're going to see teams play a lot not to lose rather than to win. They're going to get leads, 10, 12 minutes left to play in the game, and you're going to see them start to spread it out. And so I don't think there's going to be a tendency to carry the action as much to the opponent. So certainly it's going to affect. So can the teams, then playing under 30-second clock, go back to that? Can they be flexible enough
to go back outside. I was kind of interested in the late stages of the recent Clemson-Carolina game, that even with a big lead, Dean Smith elected 3 times down floor to spread and go to his 4 corners and operate out of it a little bit. And so that's preparation. That's getting ready.
Well, you've seen dozens and dozens of great sports events. Which one do you remember most vividly? 1, 2, or 3 of them?
Well, you know, I said to myself one time back in the early 70s when the tournament still had a lot of its drama, and you know, I think the tournament indeed still does have some drama, although not as much to say, because you know in our rule book it says the Atlantic Coast Conference champion will be the winner of the tournament. So that's, right. You know, so the teams still want to win it because it determines the champion, even though several teams will go. I think probably the best tournament I ever saw was '75. Out of 7 games played, Bill, there was a combined total of 20 points difference in the 7 ball games. That was the year, of course, Phil Ford was a freshman, and they beat, North Carolina beat NC State, David Thompson, Monty Tao's senior year. I think the best tournament game I've ever seen was State's victory over Maryland in 1974, 104 to 100, I think, in overtime. That game was not only a great game because of that score and the fact that it went overtime, but if you remember it, you remember that that game started, and I think the entire first half was played without a single mental mistake. I mean, no travel, no double dribble, no 3-second violations, and there were 2 great teams that went at each other, and it was unfortunate Maryland couldn't go anywhere after that was over. You know, the national finals that year were played in Greensboro. North Carolina State went on to win it all. And to be quite honest with you, to me, the NC State UCLA and the semifinals and the NC State Marquette game of the national championship was really kind of anticlimactic after you'd looked at State and Maryland. But in the early 70s, I've never seen a World Series in person. I've never seen a Kentucky Derby. I've been to the Masters, which I really enjoy, and that's quite a social event and a sporting event as well. But I was sitting there one night getting ready to do the championship game of the ACC tournament, and the thought crossed my mind, well, you know, what are these other sports events that you haven't been to? But there may not be a greater sporting event anywhere in the country than the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament.
That game, now I think it can be said, Woody, that of the fellows out on the floor that night, 8 of them became professional performers.
Right. That was the
First
John
string.
Lucas Maryland team, and of course David Thompson, Monty Tao.
Burleson.
Tommy Burleson from up in Newland was just outstanding that particular night. I remember that he scored something like 38 or 39 points against Lynn Elmore. And then I realized, of course, the next year, how essential Burleson was to that team, because Thompson and Tao were not as effective the following year without the big man. And I think that's what we get back to, Bill, the great teams. And we talk about a lot of basketball teams being one big man shy of a great team. And you remember really when Dean Smith really got it started here at Carolina back in the late 60s, it was Rusty Clark, the first big man who came to Carolina.
Who are some of the great characters you've known in sports?
Got to start with Bones.
Well, Horace, he's over here by himself.
Yeah, he sure is. Just I thought was a great bench coach when he was coaching. As I say, our travels during the time we were working the telecast together allowed us to really get to know each other and so forth. And I've heard most of his stories 100 times, and I still laugh as hard at them when I hear them for the 100th time as I did the first time. Just a great individual person. Getting to know people that I considered to be legends, like Everett Case and Frank McGuire and people like that. And right now to be closely associated with a man that is almost a legend, if not already, and that's, of course, a guy like Dean Smith. To be associated in football with a guy like Dick Crum, who in a very similar, but in some ways a different way, is building as a good a program, I think, in football as Coach Smith has put together in his 22 years here in basketball. And but some of those people, a lot of them are too numerous to mention. A lot of people ask me sometimes, said, who's your favorite sportscaster? Who do you? And I have a real good time listening and knowing, now that I've gotten to know him a little bit, I really enjoyed Dick Enberg.
He's wonderful.
And I think he did a good job of when he handled Billy Packer and Al McGuire, and that takes a knack to do that. He kept Billy from getting too serious and Al from going out on too many of his tangents and so forth. And I think he has now made Merlin Olsen feel very comfortable as a football. And those are sort of the things I look for, because when you work with other people, then you are conscious of the fact of not only in doing the game, but how does that person sit down in the booth and work with other people? And in getting to know Dick, the reason I like him a lot is he still has a lot of the little boy in him, Bill, which I think all of us who do this have to have.
You're very much alike in your style, and makes what people listen to both of you. So
yeah, he's a doctor of education. Not a lot of people know
yeah,
that.
He says more about universities in his work than most national people do. You know, it's been in your lifetime, really, that all of this has happened in basketball in North Carolina. You've seen this have a good, solid impact on the schools of the state in the sense of young people desiring to learn to compete and doing it within the rules and learning what good sportsmanship means?
Yes. It's unfortunate, and of course you were involved at the time, that we did also have the time in the early 60s when we had to lose one of the best sporting events that I think we ever had.
That's
but we let an outside faction get involved there that we should have done a better job of keeping out. And I know you wanted to see that to continue if it was any way, and I know it was a moment of big decision for you to have to really cut the Dixie Classic out, and at that time State and Carolina have to de-emphasize their programs a little bit. But yes, I think it has been. I think I particularly, in being so closely involved with the Carolina program, have become a bit spoiled, because I have seen the football and basketball programs be very successful and do it in the right way. Not so much trying to put itself, the Carolina athletic program, on a pedestal above everybody else, but I think at the time setting an example and showing everybody that it can be done the right way without cheating, and that it can also be done with student athletes. And you've been very involved in this, and I commend you and your contemporaries in education who have sought to get these new rules passed. Unfortunately, a big furor has been raised, and some people are trying to make racial overtones out of this, but I think I see in that some pressure being applied to the high schools beginning in August of '86 to get the young people better prepared coming out of high school to graduate from college. Certainly we want to see them come into the universities and be able to compete in athletics, because universities have intercollegiate athletic programs, because I think the system, the University of North Carolina, has got the proper mix, Bill, and you and your administrators will be commended for that. So if you're going to have an intercollegiate athletic program, you try to have the best.
I've got to interrupt, Woody. We've run out of time.
Oh, have we?
But thank you for
time goes fast when you're having fun.
Well, we were. Thank you for all you do for intercollegiate sports.
Well, thank you for having me on your program, Bill.
With Jim Hebner and our entire crew on the Tar Heels Sports Network, this is Woody Durham back at Carmichael Auditorium on the campus of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And in case you didn't know it, the Tar Heels have just reappeared from the dressing room underneath the south stands here at Carmichael. When last the Deacons and the Tar Heels met about a month ago in Greensboro, they were playing for sole possession of first place in the ACC. Tonight, 11th rated Carolina, staggered by 3 consecutive losses for the first time since 1970, needs a win to keep pace with Virginia, who got an overtime scare last night at Clemson. Wake Forest, victorious in 4 of its last 5 games, could climb into a second-place tie with Carolina tonight if it wins. And the Deacons have proven they can win in a light blue and white atmosphere. Carolina